Namaste World Racer, Sabine and Roger here. Let's watch Sri Ramana Maharshi, Jnani, a documentary about the great saint. And it was a request by world yogi Shashrao.
Yeah, so once again, this is a longer video,
Yes.
so we're going to break it up into chunks. So if you want to watch the full documentary, the link is in the description. And also, if you would like to watch it with us, the full watch-along is available on Patreon, so we'll go check it out.
Okay, well, and I already feel the blessings every time we are about to watch something about a great saint. This body, this mind knows. It knows and it's settled, so...
Yeah, so open yourself up to the blessings from this great master.
The South Indian town of Tiruvannamalai and its nearby mountain Arunachala have attracted saints and holy men for well over 1,000 years. 100 times older than the Himalayas, this mountain has been declared by Hindu scriptures to be a manifestation of Shiva himself.
What?
Wow.
I want to go.
No, that other temple was Venkateshwara.
The Skanda Purana, a Hindu scripture, states that the hill came into being after Shiva took the form of an infinite column of light and then challenged two other gods, Brahma and Vishnu, to reach its top and bottom. Neither was successful. Shiva then condensed himself into the form of this mountain, allowing pilgrims to worship it. Today, it is one of the most sacred places in southern India.
On the list.
Southern India.
Yeah.
That's why we want to go in February, March.
In 1896, a 16-year-old schoolboy walked out on his family and, driven by an inner compulsion, slowly made his way to Tiruvannamalai. Prior to his arrival, the young boy had attained enlightenment in his hometown of Madurai, located a few hundred kilometers south of Tiruvannamalai. A spontaneous inquiry into his real nature had resulted in the complete and permanent dissolution of his sense of being an individual person. It was replaced by a directly experienced knowledge that he was identical with an unmanifest substratum in which all the phenomena of the world appeared and disappeared.
Wow.
On his arrival to Tiruvannamalai, he threw away all his money and belongings and presented himself to the god in the temple. Afterwards, he remained in its precincts, abandoning himself to a recently discovered inner awareness of the divine that he felt to be the inner light of his own true being, a state that he later termed consciousness or the self. Ramana's experience and knowledge of who and what he truly was remained with him irrespective of whether his body was conscious, interacting with the world, or in a state of deep sleep. In Hindu culture, it could be said that he had realized the self. That is to say, he had realized by direct experience that nothing could exist apart from an indivisible and universal consciousness which is experienced in its unmanifest form as pure beingness, or in Indian philosophy this is referred to as Mahat, meaning awareness.
Mahat. You remember who he is now?
In its manifest form,
That's not
it
what
is
I
the
meant.
appearance and consciousness of the universe. Normally, the full recognition of this awareness is known only through spiritual practice or grace after a long and arduous period of effort, but in his case, it happened spontaneously, without prior effort or desire. Ramana became oblivious to the needs of his body, which wasted away as he was rarely conscious enough to eat or attend to its needs. Insects ate away his thighs, but the bliss of his inner experience was so intense he never noticed the disintegration of his body.
Wow.
After 3 years of living like this in various temples and shrines in Tiruvannamalai, he began a slow return to physical normality, a process that was not completed for several years. Sri Ramana spoke very little, preferring instead to communicate the essence of his state through silence. He knew from experience that if he simply remained absorbed in his own self, his own awareness, those in his proximity would, by a kind of osmosis, begin to experience that state for themselves.
I do. Starting.
He was willing to give verbal answers to questions and hand out practical spiritual advice, but he considered these to be inferior and indirect forms of transmission. To those who wanted a verbal presentation of his teachings, at the highest level that could be expressed in words, he would say that consciousness alone exists, not as an individual experience, but as an underlying substratum in which all beings and physical phenomena appear and disappear. If this was received with skepticism, he would say that awareness of this truth is obscured by the self-limiting ideas of the ego mind, and that if these ideas were abandoned, then the reality of consciousness would be revealed. He taught that the idea that one is a person who inhabits a body can be challenged and eliminated by focusing exclusively on the sense of I that registers and coordinates all our activities. When one thinks, I am angry, or I see a tree, or I am a lawyer, there is an I that believes it experiences all these things. Sri Ramana taught that this is an error that arises simply because we never look at or challenge the underlying I that has all these ideas. A vigilant focus on the I and not on the things it thinks about causes the sense of being a person to diminish and die, leaving a true knowledge of one's self. Abiding as what remains when the individual I has vanished is known as self-realization or liberation.
Boy, I think I just had
Going
an insight.
against the established
Nice.
Hindu tradition, which promotes the idea that renunciation of one's family life is essential for those who want to progress spiritually, Sri Ramana taught that this method of self-inquiry could and should be practiced in the midst of one's ordinary, everyday life. He also advocated complete and unconditional surrender to the divine and said that these two methods, self-inquiry and self-surrender, were the only two effective methods for attaining liberation.
I can see that.
Powerful. Yeah.
In just the same way that we project a dream world at night, Sri Ramana taught that the world we see in front of us is merely a projection of the one who sees it. The projection manifests on the screen of consciousness, where we take it to be real, and imagine that we too are in this world, experiencing its dramas. In this self-created world, we are issued a script that determines our activities. We are unknowing actors in a drama who fail to realize we are just following an ordained script. We are unable to recognize that we are the screen on which the action unfolds, and falsely believe that we are one of the characters. The source of the projection is the I that identifies with the body, and then creates a false dream world to play and suffer in. Inquiry into the nature and origin of this I stops the projection and establishes one in the state where one knows oneself to be the indivisible consciousness in which all creation appears and disappears. This is liberation.
Ay. Oh, Roger.
Oh, that's cute. Aw. There's two of them.
Yes.
Black and white.
I was at university in the 1970s, slowly going into debt by buying more and more spiritual books. I had an endless fascination to find out anything I could about Eastern religions. But each book I read just prompted me to go out and buy another one. Then one day at Blackwell's in Oxford, this book quite literally fell in my lap. Somebody on the other side of the shelf pushed his book through, and on my side a book plopped out into my lap. And there was my first Ramana book in my hands. Unlike every other book I had ever read, this book didn't prompt me to buy another book. It shut me up in a completely literal sense. It stopped my mind dead in its tracks. Somehow the book, which was pointing at how to be quiet, simply had the power within its words to put me in that state as I read it.
Need to get it.
There are so many books. If you go to Ramana Ashram, there are so many books about Ramana's
Mooji.
conversations. Although many of them are sourced from the same few books in the beginning.
Ramana himself always used to say that my primary teaching is silence, and that people who couldn't understand or assimilate the silence that was coming off him could ask questions and get answers, but those answers were not the primary principal teaching that Bhagavan was trying to give out.
Truth he was talking about was beyond mind and beyond words. He used to say the words are just pointers. The real teaching is in silence. And to experience that silence, it doesn't just mean physical silence, it's total silence of the mind.
It is that once your mind is established in the natural silence, which is not about speaking or not speaking. It is not about doing something or not doing something, but is to discover that inmost truth within yourself, which is what has happened in the case of Ramana. He was pointing to the immediate experience of what is.
The real I that he experienced is beyond thought and therefore beyond words. It is the basis on which everything appears. So it is the one fundamental reality, the eternal reality. So it cannot be adequately described in words or grasped by thought.
There are 60 billion bodies in the world. How do they refer to themselves? Each one of them, they are talking different language, different culture, different religions, but how do they refer to themselves? You verify in any language, I. So Maharshi said, find out. That's also he never says, as this is my teaching. He says, find out, are there 60 billion eyes or there is only one eye to which all the 60 billion bodies are referring to.
Oh, wow.
Must attribute to Ramana is that the simplicity of his pointing. He was not really into mystifying seekers. He always tried to pull out the things which were not so important. And of course, at the same time, so broad was his expression that he could speak very much and satisfy the minds of pundits of his time, great scholars of the time. And to the ordinary people, he could speak to them and in ways that they could assimilate easily and make whatever step he felt was important for them.
Most of the things that we take to be real are real relative to something else, relative to our experience that we are a body and mind. If this body is I, it must be real, because I is real. If this body is real, since it's a part of this physical world, the physical world must be real. But this is all relative to our experience. So when we talk about what is real, we have to distinguish between what is relatively real and what is absolutely real. What is absolutely real cannot be conditioned in any way, cannot be relative to anything else. It has to be real in its own right.
So when Bhagavan says the world is not real, he doesn't mean it's something you can't kick and stub your toe on and go, ouch. Reality in Hinduism is something completely different. We take reality to be whatever is perceived by the senses, whereas In Hinduism, reality is something which exists all the time, something which has its own being, and something which shines by its own light.
According to the experience of Bhagavan Ramana, this world is just a dream. We can believe that, but even if we believe it, we continue to experience this world as if it is real, as if it exists independent of our experience of it. The very simple definition of reality, that's of absolute reality, given by Bhagavan Ramana, it must be eternal, it must be unchanging, and it must be self-shining. Self-shining means it must experience itself by its own light of self-awareness. According to this definition, the only thing in our experience that is permanent is I.
Reality is that which exists and shines when everything which comes and goes has gone.
Whatever appears at one time and disappears at another time cannot be real, because it seems to be real at the time we're experiencing it. When we cease experiencing it, it ceases to appear to be real. When we're experiencing a dream, it seems to be real. As soon as we wake up from the dream, it seems to be unreal. So the mind also appears and disappears. The mind, which is the experiencer of everything else, itself is appearing and disappearing. But we experience the appearance and the disappearance of the mind. So we, that is the I that underlies the mind, are the unchanging, the one reality that doesn't appear or disappear, but is always experienced. Actually, I is like the cinema screen on which the picture is projected. It's one unchanging background on which all experience comes and goes. So, according to that definition, I alone is real.
Things that appear and disappear are not deemed to be real in Hindu philosophy. So when he says the world is unreal, what he's saying is it's not there all the time, and also it's contingent on you perceiving it. He said if there's no world there at 3 o'clock, you can't say it's real because it's dependent on you to wake up and see it. He said there's something else, something prior to all this, which never goes away, which shines by its own light, which has beingness, which is your own beingness. And that's the self, that's the reality. Everything else comes and goes as an appearance within it.
Maharshi's teaching, if you want to put in one word, is attention. Pay attention to truth which is within you.
Each one of us have to investigate within ourselves to find out, what am I? What this I actually is.
Bhagavan said, hold on to this I, watch it disappear, and you'll be amazed at what disappears with it. First of all, the idea that there's a world out there separate from you will disappear. And secondly, he said that the idea of time and space, they are constructs manufactured by the individual I to place the world in a context. Once your I disappears, the world as an object disappears, time and space disappear.
It is your subconscious mind which has created the story of the drama of the dream, and it is running the show. This self is that ultimate reality. Without the self, apart from the self, there is absolutely no world.
Sri Ramana did not just give out practical advice. He was an immense spiritual dynamo who could use his power and his presence to eradicate the false ideas his visitors had about themselves, and then show them the reality of who they truly were. This is the role and function of the true guru, to dispel the darkness of individual ignorance and reveal the true abiding state of what remains when that ignorance has vanished. In a world where gurus are generally known more for their misdemeanors than their teachings, Sri Ramana led an impeccably saintly life. He owned nothing, he was a natural celibate, and he was available to seekers at all times of the day and night.
Is it Yogananda? I thought so too.
His presence is still felt by those who are actively trying to put his teachings into practice. His loving and liberating power still flows into those who follow his practical advice.
Wow, so beautiful.
The purity of his life and the simplicity of his practical message continue to attract followers who see in him the culmination of the timeless message of true liberation. Though he never founded an organization or felt any compulsion to take his teachings to a wider audience, he has, in the decades since he passed away in 1950, attracted an expanding circle of admirers and followers who still feel the power of his presence and who are inextricably drawn to his powerful and liberating teachings.
Wow.
Yeah, an incredibly beautiful documentary of one of the most holy saints in recent times. So yeah, just hearing his whole story at such a young age, having that, insight, to look within, right? Yeah, very blessed, very fortunate, and then just, so consistent with his teaching throughout the remainder of his lifetime, right? The importance of self-inquiry is absolutely, foundational, right? So the teachings of non-duality, and then, so clear, right? So coming from direct experience, it's not like he's expounding on somebody else's teachings, right? Even though he was aware, and, read other teachers' teachings, but then he would still, display and say and teach from his own direct experience, right? Which is very, very hard to, argue with that, right? Because there is some people saying that, non-duality is just one branch of Hindu philosophy, and that's great, and I accept that, but we got to accept that there has to be an ultimate view, an ultimate reality of, and in my mind, after studying a while, it's been, obviously the highest has to be, non-duality, but within non-duality there is contained, the other branches of philosophy, so we don't have to deny them. We just have to, possibly accept as spiritual seekers, interested in liberation, that there is a highest, right? And it seems like all of the, true teachers and saints and mystics and those who have gone beyond the ego, that is what they're pointing to, because I see the similarities in even Jesus Christ teaching that me and the Father are one, right? And the Buddha, obviously, with his teachings is, the same. There's so many similarities, right? The teachings on emptiness, right? That nothing exists inherently from its own side or its own power. It's not to say that what we perceive, doesn't exist conventionally. It's saying that it's not ultimate, right? It's not an ultimate reality. The only ultimate reality, is the substrate, the subjective awareness, right? The I at the very root of our existence, is the true reality, and it's timeless, and eternal, beyond time and space, which he stated so clearly, right? And it's the only unchanging reality. And yeah, also very similar to the Buddhist teachings of impermanence, right? So whatever is impermanent and transient can't ultimately be real, including, the body, ego, mind, mental construct, right? So then what is real? What is ultimate? And then, yeah, so the direct path, which he held to, and always, always, always stressed it, self-inquiry, turn the attention within. And I love how he stressed, yeah, if his teaching could be summed up in one word, attention, right? So also, yeah, synonymous with the teachings of the Buddha and other great masters is, concentration, awareness, focus. What are you going to focus on? And then all of the greats, they point within, right? It's consciousness. So absolutely beautiful, wonderful documentary. So thank you so much for requesting this. Yeah, it was incredible. I just love the images. You can feel the blessings because, like he's stated, that you can't identify him with that body, even though obviously there's an enlightened being realized in the body. So yeah, the images, there's blessings there, being open and receptive to that. But he's stating that even while he was in the body, he wasn't the body, right? It's his consciousness, it's his field. And yeah, we can still access that and tap into that by focusing on his teachings and what he taught, and open ourselves up to the blessings of Bhagavan. Yeah, and then that creates blessings in the mind, right? Because it's our intention. If we're really truly devout, and intending to realize our true nature and our true self, yeah, all the blessings will flow in. Which I also love when he said that self-inquiry and surrender, right? So surrendering onto God, onto truth. And it seems like he was also teaching that very predominantly when he himself was surrendered onto Shiva, onto the mountain. The mountain as the the embodiment of Shiva, right? In that sense. So surrender onto the Creator, the truth, God, the ultimate, and then self-inquiry within to realize the nature of that truth within. So Sabine is tongue-tied once again, which means I can always tell when it's a very potent and meaningful and powerful video. I can always tell by Sabine's silence. Did you turn within? Yeah, focus on the self, the I. Yeah, are you there? Whoa. Yep. Race to enlightenment.
That's not what I meant. I thought you asked, do you still feel
bliss?
No. Yes, I know what he means, but of course I haven't reached that point. But I still feel I identified.
Well, anyways, thank you all so much. And remember, the most important thing why we're watching such important and potent spiritual videos is to raise ourselves
and raise the world. Thank you so much, everyone. And a very special thank you to Shash Rao, World Yogi. We love you.
Peace.